Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this virtual workshop on applying for a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, or NEH for short. I'm Mark Silver. I'm a program officer at the National Endowment for the Humanities. Today's workshop focuses on grants intended to support research and writing by individuals. This is one of a series of 11 workshops covering different aspects of NEH's programs. Recordings of the previous workshops are available on the same webpage where you found the link to this session today. And we will be recording this session as well and posting it in that library so you can access it later if you need to. I'm going to speak for about 30 minutes, and I'll show you on the next slide here the agenda. The left half of the slide provides an outline of the presentation. I'll introduce you to the NEH and its mission, explain the types of activities that we support and who's eligible to apply. I'll talk about finding the right program for you, how to submit an application, and give you some tips for writing a strong application. I'll also tell you how to get more information. And once I'm finished, I'll answer questions. As the right side of this slide indicates, you're welcome to post questions in the Q&A box at any time. And I have some colleagues who will be working on answering those as they come in. We have some handouts available at the link on the slide. I won't refer to those directly in this workshop, but you may find them useful later. Closed captioning is available by clicking on CC in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. All right, first, some basic information about NEH. We are a taxpayer-funded government agency founded in 1965, and we're dedicated to supporting all areas of the humanities, as well as those areas of the social sciences that use humanistic methods. We award grants through national competitions based on peer review by outside experts. Last year, we awarded about $132 million through our regular grant programs, plus another $67 million in emergency coronavirus relief funds through the CARES Act. This summer, we'll award an additional $135 million in coronavirus relief funds for the humanities sector through the American Rescue Plan. More information about the NEH's American Rescue Plan grants is available on the NEH website. I don't cover those grants in this workshop since those programs only accept applications from organizations, not from individuals. NEH's work focuses on the humanities, or the study of human society and culture. Here's how Congress defined the humanities in the law that created NEH. Our founding legislation says the humanities include history, literature and language, history and theory of the arts, philosophy, archaeology, religion, jurisprudence, and those social sciences employing humanistic methods. If you're not sure whether your project would fall within our scope, you can contact us to discuss that and get more information. NEH supports work in the humanities with about 30 different grant programs, and they fall into the main areas shown on this slide. That is supporting public engagement with the humanities and lifelong learning, preserving cultural and educational resources, strengthening teaching and learning, facilitating research, writing, and original scholarship, strengthening humanities institutions, and supporting state and local programs in the humanities. Many of our grants are designed for institutional applicants. So that would be museums, libraries, public broadcasting stations, and colleges and universities. Some of our programs, however, are aimed at supporting individual applicants, and it's those programs that are the focus of today's workshop. All of our programs for individuals are focused in the area of facilitating research, writing, and original scholarship. Some touch on other areas of our mission as well, but because their main focus is research, they're all housed in the NEH's Division of Research Programs. Here are some examples of the activities and products that we fund through our programs for individuals. We support things like travel to archives and other research, fieldwork, writing, scholarly editing, and we also support products such as articles, monographs, archaeological reports, translations, scholarly editions, and other interpretive tools. This slide shows examples of allowable uses of funds. In general, you can use the money for whatever you need in order to complete your approved project. That could include paying for living expenses while you're carrying out the project, course buyouts or salary replacement, travel expenses, equipment and materials, or publication costs. And in fact, our programs for individuals do not require an itemized budget. And I'll say a little bit more about that in just a minute. There are a number of things that we do not support, so you need to be aware of those before you apply. We don't consider proposals for humanitarian work, such as feeding the hungry or providing health care, so be sure that you do not confuse humanitarianism with the humanities. We don't offer funding for social services or economic development, for political activity, or for tuition for students, or to support dissertation research. We don't support creative writing or fiction, autobiography or memoir, artistic performances, or the creation of art, or work that lies outside the humanities or the humanistic social sciences. Our programs have other prohibitions as well, and those are always listed in the notice announcing each grant. So make sure to check the prohibitions in any program that you are considering applying to. Who is eligible? Eligibility is limited to US citizens and to non-citizens who've lived in the US for the 3 years preceding the application deadline. Currently enrolled students are not eligible, so if you are an enrolled student at the time of the application deadline, you're not eligible. And some programs have additional eligibility requirements. Again, those are explained in the notice announcing each opportunity. All right, how do you start to find the right program for you out of our large menu of possibilities? The best place to start is on our website at neh.gov, where you can click on the link for grants to access a full list of our programs together with descriptions of them. In a moment, I'll show you which of our programs are for individuals, but as you're deciding which one or ones might be the best fit for you, here are some factors that you will want to consider. You should think about the product that you want to create and the audience you aim to reach, your profile as an applicant, how much time you can commit to the project, the dollar value of the award, and when the deadline falls. This table shows our programs for individuals. For each one, you'll see that the table indicates the program name, the typical applicant profile, the typical product, the time commitment required, and the stipend, and the month in which the deadline falls. And as you can see, each program has its own set of parameters. So, for example, If you know you're interested in writing a book for general readers, you'll want to look first at the Public Scholars Program, since it specifically supports books for general readers. If you teach at an historically Black college or university, you should be sure not to overlook the Awards for Faculty program, since it's designed for faculty and staff at historically Black institutions, Hispanic serving institutions, and tribal colleges or universities, or as the slide says, at HBCUs, HSIs, and TCUs. While we're on this table, let me follow up on what I said about budgets before. As I said, we don't require you to submit an itemized budget with your application for any of these programs. That's because we determine the dollar amount of the award based on the number of months of support that you are requesting. You can see that in our fellowships program at the top of the chart, we offer 6 to 12 months of support at $5,000 per month. So if you request 10 months of support, your award would be for $50,000. It's a very simple calculation. Keep in mind that if you accept an award for 10 months of support, you're committing yourself to 10 months of work on the project. That's what I meant when I said you should consider the time commitment involved as you weigh your options. In the fellowships program, the minimum commitment is 6 full-time months. A word also about our deadlines. In all of these programs, we offer only one application deadline per year, and the month of the deadline is consistent from year to year. You need to pay attention to the deadline month, not only so you know when the application is due, but also because the earliest that you can start holding a grant is about 8 to 9 months after that deadline. One other thing you may want to take into account is the rules that we have on submitting concurrent applications. For example, you can't apply to more than one of the April deadline programs at the same time. So you have to choose one of those 4 programs. But we do allow other combinations of applications. So for example, you are allowed to apply to both the Summer Stipends program and the Public Scholars program concurrently. The exact restrictions we have on concurrent or multiple applications are always spelled out in the notice for each program. All right, before I move on, one other word of caution about this table, which is that it's only a summary, so it doesn't capture every detail. For example, if you look at the fellowships program, book is listed as the typical product, and that is the most typical product in that program, but it's not the only allowable product in the fellowships program. So let's go into a little more detail now about each one of these 7 programs listed in this table. First up, the fellowships program. These awards generally support research or writing leading to scholarly publication, and the product can be either a print product or a digital product. You can apply for support to write a book. You could also apply for support to write peer-reviewed articles or to do a translation, to prepare a scholarly edition, or to create a digital tool of some kind. Most of these awards go to scholars with a PhD in their field who are writing a scholarly book, but the program is open to non-PhDs and to projects intended for general readers. These awards must be held for 6 to 12 months. You must engage in continuous full-time work for the entire time. So if you teach, you'll probably have to arrange for a leave in order to accept one of these awards. The stipend in this program is $5,000 per month with a maximum of $60,000. The deadline's in April, and you could start your project as soon as the following January. The books shown on this slide, by the way, were supported by the NEH Fellowships Program, and the books shown on the next several slides were supported in each case by the program on that slide. So next is summer stipends. If a time commitment of 6 to 12 months is not right for your schedule, the summer stipends program may be a better option for you. All awards in this program are for 2 months of continuous full-time work with a total stipend of $6,000. People at any stage of work are welcome to apply to this program, but it's often a particularly good fit for people in the early exploratory stages of a project, or for people in the late stages of a project who, for example, might need just to write one remaining chapter of a book. The deadline in this program falls in September, with the earliest start in the following May. The typical applicant profile and the typical products are similar to those for fellowships for the program that we just had on the last slide. If you are a tenure track faculty member, to be eligible for the summer stipends program, you must be nominated by your institution, which may mean going through a selection process on your home campus. But you're exempt from this requirement if you are non-tenure track or part-time, or if you have no institutional affiliation. You can apply without a nomination if you're in one of those categories. All right, next, the Public Scholars Program. This program supports well-researched nonfiction books in the humanities written for a broad audience of general readers rather than for scholars. These awards typically go to scholars who want to write for a general audience, or to journalists working on a book, or to biographers or other researchers or writers. Those people may or may not have a PhD. Many of them are publishing books with trade presses rather than with university presses. These awards are for 6 to 12 months, but this program allows part-time work during the award period. The applications are due in December, and you could start holding your grant as early as the following September. There is an eligibility requirement beyond our basic requirements in this program, and that's noted on the slide. You have to meet our requirement for previous publications, and that is that you must either have published a nonfiction book in the past, or at least 3 articles in general interest publications that command a large national audience. And that brings us to awards for faculty. The full name of this program is long, so I've used abbreviations on the upper left of this slide. The full name is Awards for Faculty at Historically Black Colleges and Universities, Hispanic Serving Institutions, and Tribal Colleges and Universities. So that's what those abbreviations are. They came up previously as well. This program is meant to be more flexible than our other programs, both in its award terms and in the types of projects that it supports. In this program, you can apply for 2 to 12 months of full-time support or the part-time equivalent. So part-time work is allowed in this program. And in addition to scholarly publication, the program also supports research leading to revision of a course in the humanities or to the advancement of a community goal at your institution. The deadline for this program falls in April, and you could start holding your grant as early as the following January. To be eligible for this program, you must be a faculty or staff member at a qualifying institution. Status as an HSI or Hispanic serving institution, just to be clear, is conferred by the Department of Education. So before applying in that category, you should be sure to check that your school has official status as an HSI or Hispanic serving institution. Next up, NEH Mellon Fellowships for digital publication. These fellowships support born digital projects, by which we mean projects that can only be published in digital format, either because they offer the reader flexible pathways through the material, or because they incorporate audio or video clips or other multimedia elements of some kind. These awards tend to go to scholars with a PhD in their field, although a PhD is not required in order to apply. The award periods and the dollar amounts are the same as those for regular fellowships. And the deadline falls in April, with the earliest start date the following January. The next one on our list is Fellowships for Advanced Social Science Research on Japan. These are also 6 to 12-month fellowships. They require continuous full-time work, and the maximum award is $60,000. These support social science research on Japan rather than research in the humanities. And they're designed for scholars with advanced Japanese language ability. We run this program in partnership with the Japan-United States Friendship Commission, or JUSFC, which is the primary funder of the program. This is another one of those April deadline programs, and the following January would be the earliest time you could start holding the grant. The last program in the list is another one with a long name, Dynamic Language Infrastructure Documenting Endangered Language Fellowships. This program supports documentation of endangered languages or languages that have very few remaining native speakers. And this documentation could be done through such things as recording text samples, or the preparation of dictionaries or grammars or databases or some combination of those things. These awards generally go to professional linguists or to others who have the knowledge and the close ties with the language communities they're studying that it would be necessary to pull off a project of this kind. These are 6 to 12-month fellowships, like many of the other ones that we've talked about, and they must be held full-time, but you're allowed to break the award period into 2 segments in this program. The deadline is in September, and you could start holding your award as early as the following May. And we run this program in partnership with the National Science Foundation, or NSF, which is why their logo appears on the slide there. All right, so that was the last of the 7 programs on that table. And here's the table one more time, just to pull everything together for you. And before I finish with this and finish talking about these 7 programs, you may be wondering about the percentage of applications that we usually fund in these programs. Here are some representative statistics on that. In general, we're only able to fund about 7 to 10% of the applications that we receive in our programs for individuals. Sometimes that percentage goes just a little bit higher, but not much. So I realize these odds look long, and it may look discouraging, but I encourage you to throw your hat in the ring. Remember that your chances will immediately go to 0% if you don't apply at all. In addition to the 7 programs I've just talked through, NEH also supports residential fellowships at about 25 domestic and foreign research centers. And we also partner with the Library of Congress in its program of residential fellowships at the John W. Kluge Center at the library. These residential programs, as the name implies, require that you be in residence at a particular location. And they also require that you apply directly to the center in question, not to NEH. And their application materials differ from NEH's materials. More information about those programs is available at the links on the slide. But getting back now to those programs for which you do apply to NEH, next I'm going to talk about how to assemble and submit an application. As I mentioned already, you can browse a full list of all our grant programs on our website, NEH.gov, by clicking on the link for grants. Each program has its own program resource page or landing page. On the slide here, I have, as an example, the resource page for the Public Scholars Program. You can see there's basic information about the grant in the grant snapshot on the right-hand side. There's also a description of the program. But the key document that you really want to look for is what we call the Notice of Funding Opportunity. And to find it, you need to scroll down to the lower portion of the resource page and click on the link to download that document, which is usually about a 20-page long PDF. The Notice of Funding Opportunity, or the NOFO for short, describes the program and its purpose in detail. It will explain who's eligible. It lists the prohibited project types. It also spells out the review criteria for that particular program, as well as explaining how to prepare and submit your application materials. Those application materials differ depending on the particular program. Here, for example, are the materials we ask for in the fellowships program. You must submit a 3-page narrative statement, a bibliography, a resume, a writing sample, supporting letters, and then there's some additional online forms as well to fill out. Back on the resource page, you should also look out for our FAQ document, listing and answering frequently asked questions. There's also a list of recently funded projects for each program on the resource page, and then samples of winning applications that you can refer to as well. Once you've prepared your materials, you have to submit them through a separate website at grants.gov. That's the main portal for most federal grants. If you're applying for a grant for individuals, you need to create a grants.gov account for yourself in order to submit your application. And you should do that well in advance of the application deadline. There are instructions for creating your grants.gov account in the Notice of Funding Opportunity for each of our programs for individuals. All right, now I'm going to talk about how to write a strong application. First tip is to get started early, prepare early. It takes some time to find the right program, to put together your application, to wait for an answer from us as well. So you should be trying to plan about 18 to 24 months in advance of the time that you want to hold your grant. Read the notices of funding opportunity. You can use those to help you begin to understand each program. And then once you decide that you want to apply to a particular program, make sure to read the notice carefully. You'll be at a real disadvantage if you don't do that. You'll find that some of the language in our notices is on the bureaucratic side, but wade through it. Reading those notices carefully is really crucial to success. I mentioned already that there are sample applications available on the resource page for each program, so study those. You shouldn't try to imitate them, but they will help you see how successful applicants have presented their projects. Watch the program-specific information session. We provide an online information session for most of our programs, and those sessions highlight key points for applicants to that particular program. You can find updates about these sessions on the resource page for each program. Contact a program officer. If you have questions about which program is best for you or about a specific program, get in touch with us. It's part of our job to help you understand our programs and to help you put your best foot forward as an applicant. Then the last point on this slide, submit early. We recommend that you submit your application well ahead of the deadline so you have time to address any technical problems that might crop up. Make your case. So how should you make your case? A couple of tips here. As you're writing your application, be sure to zero in on the review criteria. Address those criteria as directly as you can. These are the criteria that we use to select the best applications. And those criteria always appear in section E1 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Demonstrate your project's significance. The exact evaluation criteria vary by program, but all of them require you to explain why your project matters. You should think carefully about how to do this. If possible, using a clear example of something that we'll see differently thanks to your work. Have a clear and realistic work plan. Every program will also ask you to explain how you're going to use the time afforded by a grant. Be sure your explanation of this is clear and make it as detailed as possible. You don't want to leave any doubt about how you're going to be using the time, given that taxpayer money is at stake in these programs. Know and remember your audience. Your application, once you submit it, will go through a multi-stage selection process. It's going to be reviewed by a panel of outside experts, by NEH staff, by the members of the National Council on the Humanities, and by the chairman of the endowment, who makes the final decisions about NEH awards. So your application will need to satisfy specialists in your field, but it will also need to speak to readers outside your field. So write for specialists and for generalists. One way to do that is to avoid jargon and also to provide clear explanations of your key concepts. Solicit feedback from stand-in evaluators. In other words, look for people that you know who can read your application for you, read it against the review criteria that we use, and then give you feedback about your strengths and weaknesses, or about the application strengths and weaknesses before you actually submit it in final form to us. Submit a draft application when permitted. In some programs, not all, but in some, we allow you to submit a draft application for review by NEH staff. And we read a lot of applications, obviously, and often we can suggest changes that will strengthen your application before it goes through the formal review process. Again, look to the notice of funding opportunity for the particular program you're interested in for information about submitting a draft. Pay attention to details. The best applications are meticulously prepared. So you want to be one of those meticulous preparers. Proofread carefully. If your application requires a bibliography, give that careful thought. Don't let it be an afterthought. Make sure your bibliography is up to date. Make sure that it sends the right signals about your approach to your topic. Make sure the application is complete and compliant. Double check that you're submitting all the parts of the application that we ask for. Make sure that you're complying with the page limits and the other formatting requirements. We handle a lot of applications, and so we really have no choice but to disqualify those applications that are not complete and compliant. We're not able to come back to you and ask for adjustments to your application. The last point on this slide, follow up with your letter writers. If the program you're applying to requires separately submitted letters of support, check on our website to make sure that they've come in. There are instructions for doing that in the notice of funding opportunity. And if there seems to be some problem, follow up to see what's going on. We will not disqualify you because of a missing letter, but it does tend to make for a weaker application. After you get the results, request the comments from the external reviewers. We're a public agency, so we try to be as transparent as we can. And that includes providing you with the reviewers' written comments. Often those comments will help you improve your project, even if you have won an award. And then also consider reapplying. If you're not successful, but the reviewers seem receptive to your proposal, consider revising and resubmitting it in the next round. As I mentioned, our programs are highly competitive. You saw those percentages of success. So that means that many applicants are receiving funding only after a second attempt or even a third attempt. If you're unsure whether you should reapply, you can consult with a program officer on the staff to get advice about that. This is the final slide I'll put up. It has contact information that will allow you to get more information or get your questions answered. I've also put up 2 of our Twitter handles here and a URL that you can use to sign up for NEH's mailing list. All right, that's the end of the presentation, and now I'll take questions. You can enter or continue to enter questions in the Q&A box, and I think my colleague Ellen Jones is there to let me know what has come in.
Thank you so much, Mark. We've had a lot of questions asked so far that have been answered in the Q&A section. One that we normally get is, what do you recommend that someone do if they've already applied for a grant unsuccessfully?
Yeah, that's a good question. You should certainly request the evaluator's comments and look at them closely and look for clues about what you might do differently in your application. Sometimes people look at their comments and they think, this reviewer is really off base in making that comment, and I'm not going to really pay attention to that comment. I would suggest a different approach, which is trying to ask yourself, all right, maybe that comment is somehow off base, but is there anything in my application that led the reviewer to see my application in that way and to make that criticism of it? If you take that sort of one step away from your initial reaction to the reviewer's comments and think about what there might have been in your application that led to this sort of undesirable view of it by the evaluator, you may get onto the track of something that you could revise or change in your application that will improve your chances. As I mentioned in the presentation, if you'd like advice on whether or not you should reapply, we're available to consult with you about that as well. Sometimes we can try to help you parse the comments that you got and make some suggestions about things that you might do differently if you do decide to reapply.
All right. Do you have any advice on how to choose the best recommenders?
Yes. So sometimes people fall into the trap of thinking that they need to find recommenders who are very famous, very well known in their field, top names that will be recognized by the review panel. Having those sorts of recommenders doesn't hurt you, but it's really not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you find recommenders who know your work well and will take the time to read your application and craft their letters of recommendation based on their reading of your specific project as you've proposed it to NEH. So you absolutely should show your application to your recommenders so that they're equipped to write a letter that is long on specifics about your project. What you want really is a nice paragraph in that letter speaking to the significance of your project. Remember, I said that all of our programs will have as one of their review criteria the significance of your project. So coach your letter writers to speak to the question of why your project matters and what the payoff for it will be. A little more on the question of who you should ask. If you're a junior scholar, say fewer than 7 years out from receiving your PhD, you're really well within your rights to ask your dissertation advisor for a letter. And that person may well be in a position to write you a strong letter. Once you get beyond that point, more than 7 years out from the PhD, I would start to look beyond your dissertation advisor and to get letters from people other than your dissertation advisor, because that helps signal that there are people in the field apart from your advisor who are interested in your work and who are following it and who care about the research that you're doing and the results that you're likely to produce. Another question that comes up is, should I ask someone at my own institution for a letter? Some evaluators do take the attitude that it's better to have a letter from someone outside your own institution, again, because that signals that people beyond your own institution are interested in the work that you're doing. I think that's probably worth bearing in mind, unless it really turns out that there is someone at your own institution who is a leading scholar in the area and can speak with considerable authority about your project. So in that case, there may well be reasons to go to someone at your own institution for a letter, but that's relatively rare. So I think I would, in general, say look for people beyond your home institution to write these letters, and then choose someone who will take the time to write a strong letter that includes a nice paragraph about the significance of your project as proposed in the application.
All right. Do projects that have a more discipline-specific focus that can be perceived as niche or specialized stand worse chances of acceptance? Is it recommendable to frame the impact of these projects in broader terms, even if that framing is idealist?
Idealist, I guess, in the sense of stretching things a little bit. Well, this is a good question. I mean, in general, we like to think, and we try to design the review process so that projects that are rather specialized in their focus, provided they are significant within the area that they're contributing to, will have just as good a chance of getting funding as a project that is framed in broader terms. That said, it is possible that your project will be perceived as being quite narrow and of uncertain significance beyond, even within its own field and beyond its field. So you don't want to present that sort of an application. So all things being equal, I would think about a way to frame your project to emphasize the breadth of its significance and the way that it might intersect with other disciplines or with the work that people outside your immediate field are doing. But the last part of that question was, even if it's a sort of idealistic framing of the project, you want to be careful there. You don't want to overstate the significance of your project. You want to avoid hype as you're describing what the payoff of your project is, because our reviewers tend to be quite sensitive to hyperbole of that kind. So what you really want to do is think about a carefully calibrated statement of the significance of your project. So, and this takes work, and it probably takes discussions with other people too, to really hit the nail on the head here. But you want to figure out just what the significance of it is, not overstate that significance, not undersell the significance, but just get yourself into the Goldilocks zone with making a just right, a carefully calibrated claim about the significance of your project.
Can a project be funded by multiple NEH grants? For example, both a summer stipend and a public scholar grant?
The answer is it depends. And there are details always about multiple awards contained in the notice of funding opportunity for particular programs. In certain cases, we don't allow you to get funding for the same project from multiple grant lines. But in other cases, we do. So the best example of that would be applying for a summer stipend. That's one of those smaller 2-month grants, and then developing the project with the benefit of the summer stipend. And then after you've developed the project with that first grant, applying for a fellowship and trying for a 6 to 12-month grant to take that project to fruition. But again, it depends on the particular combination of programs that you have in mind. So start by looking at the notices of funding opportunity for information about that. And if you have questions, then contact a staff member to discuss.
We've also gotten a question about the eligibility of community college faculty for research grants.
Community college faculty are eligible for, in principle, for everything that I described, all of those grants that I described. In some cases, I did mention particular eligibility requirements for particular programs. So for example, the Public Scholars Program has a previous publication requirement. But so you would need to meet that. But otherwise, there's no restriction in terms of institutional affiliation, with the one exception of the Awards for Faculty program that requires that you be a staff or faculty member at an historically Black college or university, an Hispanic serving institution, or a tribal college or university. But otherwise, those programs that I described are open to scholars with or without an institutional affiliation and with any type of institutional affiliation.
I think all of the questions that have been asked so far have been covered either by you or in the Q&A chat. If folks have additional questions, we encourage you to reach out to the email address or phone number currently on the screen. Again, this recording will be available on NEH's website and its YouTube page next week.
All right, thank you, Ellen, and thanks to all of you in the audience who watched the presentation.